Hello, hello. Welcome to The Whole Picture, where we chat with your favorite entrepreneurs and creatives about their passion projects, hobbies, the deep interests, and the things that keep them in it for the long game. Today, we are joined by Dr. Albert Bramante, and he is someone who reached out to us and saw the interview, I believe, with Candace James. And
Mhm.
so, thank you so much for joining us and tell us a little bit about you and your specialties.
Sure. Well, thank you, Brittany, for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. So, my primary job, or I guess you could say focus, is working with actors. So, I represent actors in New York. I have an agency in New York City, Bramante Artists. We're a full service talent agency representing actors across the board: film, TV, theater, commercial, written voiceover. I also have a background in psychology, a PhD, and while I was working kind of at both angles as a psychology part-time psychology professor and agent, I my focus has been really supporting actors and creatives as much as possible. So one thing that I was noticing, an area that kept coming up for actors, was the idea of self-doubt and self-sabotage. And so I noticed this issue, especially coming up, especially since I started. It was like really happening a lot when I first started. And I kind of wanted to know what's going on. I've always had a very curious mind, like what I want to investigate. So I did my PhD thesis dissertation on self-defeating behavior in performing artists.
Wonderful.
And so after I received my PhD, several years later, I decided I'm going to turn this into a book. And that's exactly what I did. And that's where Rise Above the Script was born. And I put a lot of research into it. I put also a lot of personal experiences in it, especially my experience as an agent, especially working with actors. So self-sabotage is pretty much just a pattern that kept coming up a lot with creatives. And it has a lot to do with self-doubt, perfectionism, all of that. And that's kind of like where, what I really focus on.
Yeah. Why do you think that it is? Because I have noticed this not only in myself, but I also am surrounded by actors. I'm an actor, my husband's an actor. We both write and produce. And I notice that that is the case with a lot of us, is that we do come up against this imposter syndrome, self doubt, self sabotage, kind of messy ball of emotions. More often, I would say, than people who I bump into in different industries. And so why do you think that is?
If it's very interesting. I've often found that a lot of it has to do just the nature of the business.
Mhm.
A lot of actors are really passionate. They want to create, they want to produce, they really want to put content out there. And the market is very saturated, overly saturated.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it. Especially whether you're in New York or LA, it's really overly competitive market. So you're dealing with 100,000, several 100,000 actors across the country, and a very limited number of roles that can be available at any given point. So there's going to be a lot of no's and yeses, and I think a lot of it has to do with the uncertainty,
Mhm.
because this is not like a 9 to 5 job. This is not a predictable income, a
Yeah.
predictable industry, and it can be very volatile at times. I mean, as you know, these past 5 years have been very challenging
Yeah.
on the business, which is already challenging to begin with.
Yeah.
Since we recovered from COVID and then the strikes in
Strikes.
23, so that didn't really help us. And also, it we at least some of the actors I've encountered is they sometimes are not fully supported by their family. So they're well, and I believe that the family is well intentioned. They have
Yeah.
well intentions. They really do care about their loved one, but they sometimes send wrong messages, like when are you going to get a real job, or when are you going to
Yeah.
get a you know a grown
Something
up
stable.
stable type of job. They don't understand, and that's what I really say. It's kind of like, okay, they don't really understand the profession.
Yeah.
So that can often add time and time again. And just I think just sometimes being told no. An actor goes into the audition, they pour their heart and soul into it, and then crickets.
Yeah.
Because very rare, I mean, sometimes you'll get told, like, no, we want in another direction, but a lot of times you do not hear
Fear
anything.
nothing. Yeah.
Hear nothing, and it's crickets. And that can add up over time.
Yeah.
So, and then I think what happens is it can start to wear down. You start developing, fear of failure, fear of putting yourself out there. And that's where that self-doubt imposter syndrome is like, well, I spent, so much money on training. Either I
Yeah.
went to BFA or MFA, or I went to some type of conservatory, dropped almost six figures, and I have nothing, you have nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
So that can often add up in time, over time, and create that self-doubt and imposter syndrome. And also, it really depends upon what background of that particular actor is.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of, especially the actors I work with and I've encountered over the years, often have their own separate personal issues, trauma, unresolved trauma
Yeah.
that comes up. All another Because another thing that's really not really talked about outside is how this trauma can affect performance.
Yeah.
And especially if you're an actor who's auditioning and taking on roles that are pretty dark,
Hmm.
and you almost become, not only have your own issues to deal with, you start absorbing the characters that you're playing, their issues, because most actors that I know are empath or have
Yeah.
strong empathy, and that's what I believe is important to connect to a character,
Yeah.
is the empathy, and you're also just very passionate. So, and so a lot of times that can turn into self doubt, and which will then add to self-sabotage and imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So, and why it's such a sneaky pattern, with especially when it comes to self-sabotage, is a lot of actors are not realize, or anybody who really engaged in heavily self-sabotaging does not consciously realize what patterns are really happening.
Yeah.
So they really don't have an awareness of what's really happening. It's not like somebody walks around and say, "Hey, I'm self-sabotaging today," and
Yes.
don't
Right.
you and I've talked about this with other acting coaches and acting teachers and other agents, and it's one of this trend that we're seeing. A lot of actors are their own worst enemy.
Mm, certainly. Yeah.
And so I guess it's my kind of like my mission is like, how can I help reduce that number a bit so that this isn't happening?
Yeah.
And there's so many. There's so many different factors there.
So, what would you say to someone? Because I think the interesting thing is like, I know I was told we came from the Southeast. We moved to New York in November. And in the Southeast, it was obviously a very different market, and it was relatively easy to get an agent, or I shouldn't say easy, but I got an agent, I was represented. It was we were on sets a lot more, and up here
Hmm.
it is significantly more competitive as we expected. Um, but I noticed that, there's this kind of like chicken or egg situation where it's like, well, just put yourself out there, just connect with people, just network, just do the thing. But
Hmm.
to do that, you have to kind of overcome a hurdle first, and that is your own brain. And so
Hmm.
that's something that's, what would you say to an actor who's experiencing that where it's like, I know these are the things I need to do, but also like I can't get out of my own way in order to do the thing.
Well, the one insight that I find that a lot of actors that are getting in their own way lack a trait or need help with developing a trait of conscientiousness.
Mm,
And so that means being more focused, because it's great to have these wonderful ideas. And also, I think, which is becoming one of the things that's becoming recognized is a lot of actors may fall into the neurodivergent
mhm.
framework, which the brain may not work the same way as someone in corporate or finance or accounting.
Yeah,
And so a lot of times actors feel like their brain is working against them and that their
yeah,
mind is working against them. So that may just take extra focus. So one thing I would say is, okay, let's focus on one thing at a time. And Okay, putting yourself out there. What does that look like? Now, another thing which is kind of like surprising for a lot of people is a lot of actors are introverted.
Yes.
Yes, they may play large and life characters on stage, and they may be very gregarious when they're performing,
Yeah.
but when they're not performing, it's introverted.
Yes.
And I've noticed that too. Like some of the most, even the most flamboyant actors on stage and screen, when you talk to them off camera, it's like a completely different person,
Person.
and so a lot of times what's really happening is what they're performing, but they're performing for an internal purpose.
Mm,
So, but I think part of that is like we got to break that a little bit. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to hang out at the crowded bar and club, or a nightlife every night. But that might mean going to some film festivals, going to some
yeah.
networking opportunities. So you do have to step outside your comfort zone a little bit
Yeah.
and just go professionally. You don't have to personally go for personal reasons, but just go for professional reasons. And that's where I think there's a lot of untapped market, because one of the things that I really suggest from my clients and actors is go to these it doesn't have to be like a huge film festival. Go to these small ones. Go to
Mhm.
these specialized ones. Go to film soirees and film nights, screening nights, because the filmmakers that are going to be producing their next film are going to be there, and it's great
Yeah.
with a network, because as much as this is all about like how talented you are, but that's important. It's also who you know
Yes.
and developing relationships.
Yeah.
And you have to almost do have to think like a business person or CEO of a company. You have to network and build your
Hmm.
Rolodex.
Yeah.
So that would be the first thing I would say is like start small. I'm not saying you have to go to 5 in a week. Go to one, maybe aim for one event a week or 2 events a month to start, and then just go, because I
Yeah.
feel like some actors fall into two categories. One camp, either they're too pushy where they drive people away,
Hmm.
or they don't push themselves enough.
Yeah.
And because sometimes they tell me, I'd have a consultation with an actor, and they would tell me I'm doing this, and we'll have you notified people? No. Have you
Hmm.
posted this? No. Why not? Why haven't you notified your mail, or keep an active mailing list? I'm not
Yeah.
talking that you have to spam, but keep a mailing list of all contact, casting directors, agents, managers, producers that you meet, and every 1 or 2 months, send them an update like, "Hey, this is what I'm doing." And
Yeah.
I think a lot of actors don't do that, and that's getting in their own way.
Yes, and I will say I'm an introvert and I struggled to do this, but I did in South Florida or in Central Florida. We had a film community that had like a festival every 2 or 3, I think 2 or 3 times a year. And there was a challenge aspect to it where you made a 9-minute film and then you were part of this festival. And I have made more connections there than
Mhm.
anywhere else, and when we moved to New York, they came, they opened a chapter here. So, it's also, I was at Tribeca last night, and I got to meet, Marlee Matlin, which was so cool. She had a documentary there. So, when you are in the room, you really do start to meet people, and I think if I'm hearing you right, it's like thinking the way to get into that room is to kind of start treating yourself like a business, like a professional, going for professional
Mhm.
reasons. Because what stopped me was like, I don't personally want to do this. I don't want to go put myself out there, but when I got into the mindset of a business owner and got into that aspect of
Mhm.
it, there's a reason that you're going. Like you would go to happy hour if you worked at a corporate office and they were like, "Hey, we're all going to happy hour. This is how you get FaceTime with the boss or whatever." You would go because you're in your
Yeah.
your corporate mindset. So it's similar. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Absolutely. It's like going out to the, happy hour, or, a group dinner to connect with prospects. You never know.
Yeah.
So, and that's, I would say definitely separate. You're not going there for personal reasons. You're not going there to meet anyone. You're perfectly, you have a
Yeah.
family. It's not about that. So
Mhm.
it's about just making those contacts,
Yeah.
and it's uncomfortable. I get it.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable to do that, but it'll start raising your confidence when you start doing things that are uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It raises your confidence level. One of the things I used to host prior to COVID, especially in New York, for actors, well, I would do this a couple times a year. I'd host a karaoke night. I feel like karaoke is a wonderful way to break
Yeah.
out of your shyness.
Yeah.
And I heard a lot of coaching groups, like people that train coaches and business owners. That's a great way to step outside of your comfort zone is do karaoke
Certainly. Yeah.
because it's and it raises your confidence. Believe it or not, when you do stuff that initially is not comfortable, because that's the only way you're going to grow. And
Yeah.
so, as an actor, you're a CEO. You're a
Hmm.
CEO of your company,
Yeah.
and you have to build contacts. You have to build a Rolodex. You have to build up. The more contacts you have, the better.
Yeah.
So that's the way I would look at it. And and this is just for any profession, really. Networking is key. And face to face. Now, as much as I know we have technology and social media and AI and all that, nothing replaces face to face networking. And
Yeah.
I think, especially as creatives and performers, that's really something that I think, should be integrated more in your day to day plans, making time for networking, making time for making plans and spaces. So, and when you do that, the more and more people you meet, the more contacts you have, the more confidence you're going to have in yourself. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, hey, that self doubt, while it's normal, and I also think imposter syndrome is demonized to some level, but
Hmm.
it's more about you just really caring about how you appear to other people.
Yeah.
And so what I kind of say is maybe it shouldn't be demonized altogether. It's like, well, because believe it or not, the most high achievers often have that imposter syndrome. I even heard, I've had clients who've been on like set with like A-list actors. And even a lot of times the A-list actors, when the scene was after the director yelled cut, were questioning themselves. Did I make the right choice? Did I make the right action? Should we do it again?
Yeah.
I don't feel comfortable with that. And so, and that made my clients really comfortable because it's like, well, hey, these are things we grapple with at the lower tiered end
Yeah.
of it. So it's I almost feel like when sometimes I hear this, I'm like, well, you're in the right space.
Yeah.
So, and I think admitting it is also a really important step
Yes.
because a lot of actors hide it or don't even realize it's what's happening.
Hmm.
So, and also another thing that I think would preventing that causes self-sabotage is perfectionism and procrastination.
Hmm.
Someday I'm going to do this. Someday I'm going to, do this and that, or, you know, and they don't make concrete plans. So I'm also part of another coaching program. And one thing I think that we were going over in today's session, which I had a group session earlier, was the idea that most people don't really know how to make plans and network.
Mm.
Because when let's say you go to a networking event or an actor, you get these cards from a lot of people, cards,
Yeah.
headshots. And what do? They sit on your desk and they mount up. And before you know it,
Yeah.
you have a nice large pile of business cards and nothing is coming of it. So the important step would be to even the next day send a note and say, "Hey, it was great chatting you about
Yes.
so and so. Let's keep in touch." And don't, the call to action is let's keep in touch. You're not asking like, please cast me here. Just
Hmm.
let's keep in touch. Let's talk. Let's keep
Yeah.
talking. And so that I feel is important because of that. And you could also then say, even add them, say, hey, can I add you to my mailing list or can I add you to my
Yeah.
newsletter? And as long as you don't spam them with every 1 or 2 months with career updates, boom. So because what you're
Yeah.
doing is you're building strategic relationships.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask you was how because once, you are out there networking, you were in a position where you're an agent and a casting director, actors want something from you, right? And so what is the right way to approach you in a networking situation to form a relationship that's actually mutually beneficial?
Yeah, and I'm going to speak this not just for me, but for umbrella for general industry people. Keep in mind we're people only, and
Mhm.
I think if you approach, and this is kind of like a soft skill to develop. approach people with the intention of building relationships, not a purely transactional basis. Because a
Yeah.
lot of people sometimes will approach me like, "Hey, can you rep me?" And they don't even know me. I'm like, "You don't know me. How do you know that
Yeah.
I'm going to be a good vibe for you, or a good fit?"
Right.
So get to know the people,
Yeah.
like you know. So if you're going and let's say you're meeting an agent and a caster, and you meet them at an event, talk to them about the film or talk about the thing that you're at.
Yes.
Say, "Hey." Get to know them first as human beings.
Yeah.
And then, because when you get someone to talk about themselves, and this is a little psychology hack, they become really fascinated. They
Yeah.
love talking about themselves. And then they're going to turn and say, and so like, Brittany, what do you do? And then, here you go.
Yeah.
That's your one of your first step in. Well, I'm an actor.
Yeah.
And then, hey, can I get your car? And then that's when you say the next day, hey, it was great meeting you, so and so. Let's keep in
Yes.
touch.
Yes.
And then that's it. No asking for please cast me or let's keep in touch.
Yeah.
So and then you just generally work that connection over time.
Yeah.
It may take a while to work that strategic
Yeah.
relationship.
Yes, I'll say one of my favorite stories is my friend, she's in LA and she connected with this casting director and they have both have senior dogs and they started like sharing on Instagram like reels back and forth to each other about like senior dog life, like, having to
Hmm.
do the diapers and all that. And years they had this relationship over DMs. And then one time she walked into a room and boom, there's the casting director. And she's like, I know you. And they started talking but it was years because she was just talking to her about a life, you know, update. Right. And
Hmm.
that's the long game that we're all playing is we're all just here, you know, trying to make good content.
Of course, and same thing with casting directors and agents. I mean, we're in the same boat, and that's probably one thing I would really love actors to, everyone, to get across is like we're all in this together,
Mhm.
and we're all trying to rise up. So keep in mind we're on your side, and I even heard
Yeah.
casting directors say it's like we're on your side.
Yeah.
So yes, I think that's great. Getting to know on your senior dogs, take an interest if you're both into yoga, or you're both into
Yeah.
a specific author, a book group. Find that interest and start talking about that, and then become friends and
Mhm.
associates with these people, and then before you know it, they're
Yeah.
not gonna even it's not gonna be twice. Say, oh, this person would be great.
Yeah.
Let me try, and then there you go, and that starts that relationship.
Yeah.
So that it's all about strategic partnerships, not purely transactional, and not purely just a job by job basis. So that's why networking, putting yourself out there, is extremely important for
Yes.
actors.
I also think there's a confidence building aspect of it because the
Hmm.
more that you do it, I have for a long time dealt with anxiety and I have been in and out of therapy for it. And I know that one of the things that has helped me the most is when my therapist said anxiety is not gonna disappear.
Right.
What you're doing is you're learning to act in spite of it. And the more that you do it, the more that I put myself in situations where I feel anxious and I do it anyways, that is
Hmm.
the muscle that I'm building. And so I would think it's the same thing here.
Absolutely. And I wouldn't be fully inclined to agree with your therapist that there's no way to get rid of it. And I think there's a lot of miseducation or misinformation out there. Like, oh, you're going to conquer and get rid of your anxiety. No, that's not possible. You're a human
Mhm.
being. And
Yeah.
actually, I'm going to even go a step further and say that a lot of times anxiety can be helpful and be
Mhm.
adaptable, be our friend, because that's what kept our species alive for,
Yeah.
that millennia,
Yeah.
thousands of years to avoid predators. Because
Yeah.
obviously, if we didn't have anxiety, we would be jumping right into the lion's den high, to the Siberian
Yeah.
tiger and be like,
Mm. Yep.
let's be friends.
Yep.
So that doesn't happen. So the important thing is to A, work with it. And what I often say, let's reframe the anxiety as passion. What if that was just passion about that and
Mhm.
excitement? And
Yeah.
transform that a bit and not necessarily get rid of it. Let's transform it a bit. So that's the important thing. And there's there's not going to be a time where you're not going to have anxiety. That's not
Yeah.
possible. However, what you can do is like use it and say, okay, this is great. I even heard, and I'm not entirely sure how accurate this was, but even Tony Robbins, for instance, has
Hmm.
a lot of anxiety sometimes before he'll go out in
Yeah.
stages. And what does he do? If you ever like, I've talked to people who've worked alongside of him and
Yeah.
insiders. He'll sit on a rebounder for like 15
Yeah.
minutes before he
Mhm.
goes on stage. That's why he's so high energy, but he's on a rebound to channel his anxiety.
Yes.
So that is, if he can do that, so can we.
Yep.
So I think the important thing is just to work with the anxiety and use it as a positive, as a tool for our friend, and rather than holding us back. So that's the important thing, is taking action. That's really, I think, the key. And a lot of actors just sit back and like, well, wait, why
Yeah.
aren't my agents calling me, or why aren't these casting directors calling me? And usually the next question is, so what are you doing?
Yeah.
How are you cultivating that? Because and for any listeners who are actors, the one thing, if you really want to have a good relationship with an agent, it should be a collaboration effort. It is not. It's how, as an agent, yes, my day-to-day job is to find you work. However, I believe that your responsibility as an actor is to help your representative
Yeah.
in that endeavor. So that means developing your own contacts, your own
Mhm.
content, keep working on your packaging, keep working on all of that stuff. Help me make my job easier when I'm
Yeah.
pitching you to casting directors.
Yes. Yeah. What does that look like for you? Because I know there's a lot of actors who are like, do I need to create my own content? What do I like? How do I make myself more valuable as an actor to my
Mhm.
reps and to the productions that I'm going to be on?
Well, that's a great content, and yes, I do believe that content creation is important, and a lot of clients that I work with are multi hyphenated, which means that they are
Hmm.
writers, directors.
Yeah.
And I think that's good, especially when we're in a downtime like this, or especially when we're in COVID or during the strikes. Find your own content, I think, is
Yeah.
extremely important. However, I would say, though, with that, I will add a caveat, and that caveat is, as long as it is representative of something you can play and
Mm,
something that's realistic. I mean, it's great you want to, and then sometimes actors like, I really want to play this type of role, but it's not really working in your type range. So
yeah.
as long as it's type specific, and if you're gonna do something that you're in, I would have someone else direct you
Yes.
who doesn't really not that invested in you. So
Yes.
like personally, so this way they can kind of like help you and point
Shape the
out things
performance.
and shape the performance, because it's hard sometimes. And because I know a lot of actors who, like, they wrote, directed, produced, starred in their own short in their films. And first of all, I applaud them. I think that's great. But if I'm going to also be quite honest, sometimes the quality is not there,
Yeah.
because, and it's not the fault of the actor. It's just sometimes wearing too many hats is that problem. So what I would say,
Yes.
okay, if you're going to write and produce, have someone else direct you.
Yes. I wish I would have had this conversation with you 2 weeks ago
Mm.
because I did a short film and I was directing. I should not have been, but it was, "Oh, I don't have anyone else to, and I'm in this, whatever." So I did it, and thankfully my husband, who is a brilliant director, came to set one day and was like, "I'm gonna," and he stepped in and it was, like, so much better.
Yeah.
I think the other benefit to doing it is I was in a position where we're creating a film in September, and we're in now the position of casting again. We've done several films, but I think that has been such a game changer for me as an actor to be in that seat where I'm literally going, "Ugh, I love this person, but their availability, we just moved something. They don't even know yet. Or we moved something. I see that their availability is off. We can't make it work, but I love their work." Like, it's so
Yeah.
down to, it's just down to logistics sometimes or the height of somebody.
And that one thing, and that's a good point that you bring up. And as much as I tell actors, as much as you can, intern,
Yes.
volunteer, work with producers, sit behind the scenes, and it'll teach you a lot, because you learn what to do and what not to do. like what
Yes.
mistakes, and you also learn that you could give a brilliant audition as an actor and do extremely wonderful job,
Yeah.
but that's only a small factor of what's going to take into getting the job. Especially the world I work in, I've booked a lot of actors over the years in network TV.
Hmm.
In network TV, it is probably one of the most toughest things to book, not because of the process, but because of how many hands it goes through.
Yes. Yeah.
I was hearing sometimes it could take up to 10 or 20 people that are making decisions on a network co-star. So it really depends on that. And it could be something very simple to
Yeah.
someone just happen to look more like the character that they're wanting in their head.
Yeah.
And you could have did a great read. However, keep that in mind, even though you did a great read, and that's why it's important to always show up and show up,
Yeah.
with 100% your A game, because it's all about relationships. And
Yes.
especially now I work, like I said, in New York market. The New York market, even though it's there's a large amount of actors, the casting community is pretty small. And I imagine the same in the Southeast.
Yes.
It's small. There's only like a handful. And the same thing really in New York. There's only like maybe 7 or 8 that work on film,
Yeah.
consistent TV projects.
Yeah.
The thing is that they will keep calling you back in. I have
Yes.
actors clients who've been sometimes called in
Yes.
15, 20 times for the same show, just different roles and
Yep.
different episodes. And it's what I keep telling them, like, that's a great thing.
Yeah.
Yes, I know there's a frustration, like you're not having booked it yet. However, keep that in mind that it's only a matter of time now.
Yeah. It is, and I saw that. I have always heard that, and I always was like, okay." But my husband did a Lifetime film last year, and he got called in 4 times with this casting director for the same film and not getting called back, not getting called back, and he was like, "I'm not doing a good job on these," you get in your head, and then they reached out with a direct offer for a different role that was not even up at the time, but they had seen his work 4 times
Hmm.
and seen his reel and seen all his stuff, and it's just and they had not communicated that at all. I think that's the thing with actors, if we hear silence, like, we see silence as bad, and I have now started to kind of realize that silence is a okay thing.
Yeah,
It's like behind the scenes stuff is happening.
right. And this comes due to another point where the confidence comes in, because you got to be okay with that. And just to know that that you're enough
Yeah,
as an actor. You did the work, you're enough,
yeah.
and whatever happens after that is great. So another reframe that I often hear a lot from the most successful actors, and I started incorporating this now in my advice and coaching with actors. When you're going into that audition room, rather than looking at it as an audition, which, well, it is, but it's
Mhm.
actually an opportunity to perform.
Yeah.
And you have 1 or 2 minutes to perform. So rather than putting those stakes on, oh, if I do a good job, I'll do a good job. You're an actor. You love to perform. Take these 1 or 2 minutes and perform. And then when it's over, let it go.
Yes.
Do not dwell on that. Because if you dwell on it, you start focusing. Am I going to get it? Is this going to happen? And then you start just beating yourself up.
Yeah.
So just let it go. After the audition's over, let it go.
Do you find that you're having to reach into your psychology background when you have actors coming to you, like, as an agent? Like, "Did I get it? How did it go?" And asking you, is that where you're pulling?
Yeah, because it's like, well, did you hear anything? And then I tried to explain. I'm like, look, I'm representing you. If I hear anything,
I will tell you.
I will tell you. If you didn't hear from me, it's not like I'm going to tell you. Oh, I forgot to tell you that people.
Right.
No, I would never do that. So, but I know but I understand where they're coming from too. They're impatient and they're
Yeah.
excited and they're passionate about it. But as hard as it is, the one thing that I really feel that actors should do is not be attached so much to the outcome,
Mm.
because again, there's a lot that's outside of your control.
Yeah.
So just do the best job you can do and have fun and look at it as a performance. Because
Yeah.
as actors, a lot of times I want to tell stories, I want to perform. That's the motivation for a lot of people becoming actors. Well, you got both of those opportunities with that audition.
Yeah.
So that's a win right
Yeah.
there. And treat yourself well after an audition. Whether you can get yourself a favorite coffee or
Yes.
buy a book or do something afterwards and say, hey, I did this. I put
Yeah.
myself out there. Let me celebrate. And again, let it go, because now what I often say is, like, as soon as that audition is over, let it go, discard the sides, put them aside, and focus on what's the next audition you're gonna do. It's like, that was great, but what's next?
Yeah. Yeah. Future focus. I think that really is like it when it starts to become a bonus that you get the job, then that is I think that's where we live. And I think for me, what's been key in that is that I have an income from like I would work as a ghostwriter and a copywriter. And so I enjoy my income and it works and it supports me. And so I didn't have this
Mhm.
for a while. I had this like feverish, like, I have to book this energy around every job. And I always am encouraging actors to find the thing that will support you that you
Yes.
don't hate.
Fine. And this brings me, and you brought up a great point, and that you're doing this other stuff to feed and nourish your soul. As actors, it's great. I'm glad you're passionate about what you do, but you should have outside interests
Yeah.
that are not related to the business. Like, some of my clients are, realtors. Some of my clients are fitness instructors. Some of my
Yeah.
clients are, um, they even do their own, like, type of coaching and mindset, or like, in this
Yeah.
case, running a podcast, hosting a
Mhm.
podcast.
Yep.
So that's the important thing, like, just putting yourself out there. And I also think that podcasting is the way to go too, for
Yeah.
actors. Create a space for you, and
Yep.
don't sit back and wait for a phone to ring. Create opportunities.
Yes.
And when you do other stuff, you're not so focused on the, again, did I get, I need this audition. I need to book this. I need to book this. Because what happens is, when you start attaching way too much expense at that outcome, or way too much pressure on that outcome, it's going to start to affect your performance.
Yeah.
Even if you don't realize, even on a micro level, it's still going to affect it.
Yeah.
So just the best mentality, and I know this is going to sound really hard, is to go into the mindset, well, it'd be great if I book it, but okay if I don't.
Yeah.
And what I noticed, even a lot of, because I work with students too, and test taking anxiety is kind of related to the same thing as audition anxiety to some level.
Mhm.
And a lot of times, the students that walk in with the, well, I studied hard and whatever happens, happens, actually do better.
Yeah.
One of my high school friends, when he was taking his SATs, didn't care. You know, he walked in the day of the test, didn't really study, just came in and said, I'm going to do the best. Everyone around him was like sweating and shaking their
Yeah.
head. No, he did the test, and not only he scored like in the top 10 percentile. And I also believe, I mean, he was very intelligent, but at the same time, it was also because there was no pressure.
Yeah.
So I think if you can approach actors, and it's my wish, is just to approach the auditions. Yeah, take them seriously, but don't put so much pressure on yourself.
Yeah. Yes. I think that is like it's one of the key aspects of like relieving tension. And I notice in my own acting is when I'm like, it's just I had an acting teacher tell me one time, it's like fixing a sink. You walked in, just like a plumber would, you walked in, you did your job. He didn't walk out and question his entire identity on his
Yeah,
way out to his car. His whole life didn't come into question, but as actors, it's like every audition can become an identity crisis.
of
Am I
course.
am I even in the right type? This character's too young for me. Do I not look like a mom yet? Oh my gosh, like you're gone, you know?
Yeah, and the same thing with a doctor. I mean, I would hope that if I
Yes.
ever have to go for surgery, then my surgeon's not like, "Am I doing the right thing?"
Yes.
Like, you better be doing the right thing.
Right.
But it's the same thing. Like, just do it, and it's a job. Go in, go out, and goodbye.
Yes.
And also another, I think a lot of mistake actors make is they're very apologetic, and they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
That one thing I hear a lot of casting directors say is, like, a lot of actors, even if they flip a line, "Oh, I'm sorry, can I start again?" No, don't. Just go right into
Just
it.
go with the scene.
Just go with it, because a lot of times, even if you watch a performance on stage, some actors may even flip a line, but you'll never know it.
Yeah.
Of course, if you're the director and writer, you may know, but obviously, other than that, you'll never know that.
Yeah.
So and so I think a lot of times actors go in with the needing approval. And that's another mistake that I. So a big policy that kind of is like a no to neediness as an
Yeah.
actor.
Yeah. And it's so tricky because it's like we do need there's this line to walk of like, but I need the job. I need them to like me. I need them to whatever in order to work as an actor. But I need to not look like it's like dating, right? Like
Yeah,
I want to, but I don't want to look too desperate. But I do want to be in this relationship, or I do want to go on this date, or I do want the job. It's like a line that we kind of have to walk.
yeah, and yeah, obviously, of course, you should always want the job that you're auditioning for,
Mhm.
but I think just taking the level and taking the pressure off yourself
Yes.
is important.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to talk to you about AI also because I saw that that is something that you are interested in, and
Hmm.
I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on it, but I am curious specifically if you've seen a lot of these we've gotten a lot of these like vertical short form um
Hmm.
things come through and I just am looking at them like I'm pretty sure AI did this, you know, it's like
Yeah, so I'm a little, I am a big, before, like, I like AI for content creation and for
mhm,
thoughts and for research. I'm still a little leery about AI in film and
yeah,
AI in images and writing and all that
yeah,
because it lacks the creativity. And there are a lot of rising vertical short films, and even as an agent, fellow agents I spoke with, it's we're not that crazy working on them
mhm,
because and I mean, there's some that are like, oh, this is a great story, and otherwise,
yeah,
I'm like, sometimes I almost
yeah,
want to contact the writer after I see a script. Like, did you write this or did ChatGPT write this?
yeah,
Because it's not that solid as a
coherent,
story, or coherent.
yeah,
And also, a lot of times the acting, just so that's my skeptical with like the vertical short
yeah,
films for actors. I really don't work on them, and unless it's like a
yeah,
really good script. One of the things I tell my clients, like, look, if you get for these vertical short films, you want to submit to them, great. Read the script before you agree for anything.
yes,
Read the script, and if it doesn't seem right, don't agree to it. And relating to that, really quickly, I would say that as actors or any, your business owners, don't be afraid to say no. Like, if you're not comfortable with it, don't do it. Just say thank you for thinking of me, but this is not something I want to pursue in the past, or I have a conflict, even if you kind of say like a little bit of a white lie. But
yeah,
don't be afraid to say no. Um, Now I use AI for content creation, for like social media, for outlining things, for brainstorming. But I still think I'm more of a believer of AI assisted content versus AI generated. And they're two different things. Because when AI generated, it'd be like taking something, cut and pasting, and using it as yourself.
mhm,
Now, most of the time, especially if you've been in some sort of had online presence before ChatGPT came out, if you just did that alone, people would notice a difference in your content. Be like,
yeah,
okay, what's this doesn't sound like? Like for me, this doesn't sound like Albert.
right,
So what I would say is use it as inspiration, but make it your own. At anything you
yes,
do, make it your own. Put your own voice into it. Revise it. Retweak it. Do not just cut and paste because it is not entirely accurate.
yeah. Yeah. I think that's where I land as a writer as well. I use it sometimes, I'll call it my junior copywriter because
Hmm.
I'll write, and then I'll get to this paragraph that is just not linking the two concepts together for me. And I'll take it and give it to it, and it'll rework it. And then I'll take it and rework it. And I'll use it almost like a brainstorming partner for a section of
Hmm.
what I'm writing. And that's been really helpful for me. And so I think that it's like a tool. It's like spell check or anything
Yeah,
else where you
it's a
would
tool. That's
Yeah.
And yeah, because and I would imagine same with creative, right? It's not creative.
Hmm.
It'll give you now. Sometimes you can use it and say, "Hey, well, this is a great angle.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go." But still, you should always be putting your own take on that.
Yes.
And so I'm not. I know some people are like concerned like AI is going to take away jobs. I'm not entirely too concerned yet.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't mean that they could generate newer. I mean, because AI is developing at an exponential rate.
I know. Yeah.
So who knows what can happen? Now I am concerned on the voiceover part
Hmm.
side of things because even when I was finished writing my book, I had offers from companies like we can have AI generate voice your book. I'm like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
And because most of the time, even if you hear a lot of times voice AI content that's narrated, you can almost tell like this doesn't
Yes.
seem like a real voice.
Yeah.
So, but I'm also concerned with voice cloning. And
Yeah.
as if you're a content creator yourself, having your own voice cloned is great. But what about other people?
Yeah.
And because if you think about it, a lot of these newer AI models clone a voice in just hearing a minute of content that you
Yeah.
create, which is both amazing and scary. So, of scary, amazingly scary. You want
Yeah.
to put those two together,
Yeah.
words together. So, what I would really hope is that the unions, especially both the Writers Guild
Yeah.
and SAG-AFTRA, really have to work to put these, have to work with legislators and
Yeah.
lawyers because you have to get some protection in mind.
Yes. Yeah. I agree. I agree. I think it's just one of those conversations that actors have to be paying attention to. I would say, like, there's so much that we kind of stay out of because we're like focused on the craft, focused on other things. But I do think it's one thing we have to be informed about because like I was doing a short film and we sent over a contract to someone who we wanted to cast, and his manager came back and asked a question about one of our points, which was like, using his image. And she said, just for this project, right? And I said, oh, yeah, of course, just for this project. But I went back in and like adapted that because there is a fear now that you will take the image and put it somewhere else and use it somewhere else. So I think we do have to have that level of understanding.
Yeah. Well, that is important because what can very often happen is it can sometimes take content, again with image content.
Yeah.
Like I think last year there was a big controversy with the artist Drake, where,
Yes.
where they created an AI video of Drake without his knowledge, and people were coming up to him saying, "I loved your new video,"
Yeah.
and Drake was like, "What video?"
I
So, and Tom Hanks was saying in an interview what he was worried about is that he'll be making movies way after he's dead, gone.
Yeah. Yes, and, Scarlett Johansson, they used her voice or the likeness of her voice for
Yeah, for
something.
for that for the OpenAI for ChatGPT because now they have a voice,
Yeah,
ChatGPT voice.
yeah. Yes, it's tricky what's happening. It can be so dangerous. I mean, like, we won't know what we're seeing. Like, "Oh, there's a video of Tom Hanks doing this crazy thing." No, it's not him, you know? And
Yeah,
that can be really, I mean, it's already scary to be a celebrity in some ways that there's attention on you and anything you've done, but when it can be generated, it starts to become even scarier, I think.
yeah, and I know a lot of AI companies are like, we want to start doing movies. I'm like, I don't know about that. Um,
Yeah.
because again, the creativity is not going to be there. You're going to get a very simple, shallow storyline.
Yes. Yeah, certainly. Yes. I've tested it. Generate a 3-minute script for this and that, and it's not there. It's
No,
just not
it's
there.
not.
And I don't know that it will ever because there is a humanness to, if you watch a story that's really relatable, it's like this mom is totally ready for work and she picks up the baby and it throws up all over her. Or what there's a humanness that we've all experienced that that they have not, that chat has not.
And no, it's because it's a robot.
Yeah.
It's a robot, and it can maybe mimic basic communication, but that's it.
Yeah.
It's not gonna pick up the idiosyncrasies of human, human connection. And
Yeah,
even theater, live theater, of course, we're not going to ever see AI theater. So that's not,
never.
live theater. So what I think, I don't necessarily think that actors, I'm not concerned yet at
Yeah,
this point. I do think though that we just have to be more careful and have some more guardrails put up
yeah,
for that. Yes, it's exciting. It's a frontier. And I also think that AI is like here to stay, so we have to embrace it on some
yes,
level. And so I kind of like uses the introduction of AI to the internet 30 years
yeah,
ago. When
exactly.
when the internet first came out, most people were really uncomfortable by it, and this thing is going to uproot society. It really hasn't.
Yeah,
We survived, we adapted, and the same thing has to come with AI. But we do have to have protections, and I really hope that for the next time around the contracts for SAG-AFTRA that they put provisions in there to protect the actors.
yes, yeah, agreed. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your insight on, from your perspective, from the casting director perspective and from the agent perspective, that is critical for us as actors and creatives, uh, and also just business owners because we know the other side of it. And you are so well versed in not only that, but how to navigate that in your mind and everything that
Mhm.
comes up. Where can people get more of you? Where can people find your book? Tell us how to
Sure.
connect.
Sure. You can buy the book on Amazon. It's available as a paperback, Kindle, and audiobook. And it's Rise Above the Script. That's the first title. Subtitle is Confronting Self-Doubt and Mastering Self-Sabotage for Performing Artists. And you can also come to my website, albertbramante.com, as well as find me on socials on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook under Albert Bramante. I'd love to connect.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. So I encourage everyone to go find his stuff, and I will put all the links down in the show notes as well. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you.
Absolutely. I look for I really thank you and I appreciate you inviting me, Brittany, on here.